If you go back to my definition of a startup, a human institution designed to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty, you realize that building a startup is not just having an idea, it's not just building a product, it's actually building a company. It's building a new organization from scratch. That new organization can build products, can have great ideas. In fact, we hope to build the kind of organization that can innovate on a continuous basis. That's a management challenge. Now, when I tell people that entrepreneurship is management, I usually get pretty blank looks because entrepreneurship is cool and exciting and fun, and management is one of the most boring concepts in the whole world. So people are like, well, how can entrepreneurship be the same as what those guys in the gray suits, going to those nameless, faceless companies? That doesn't seem right. And what I'm trying to convince people is that entrepreneurship is a kind of management. It's just not the same old, boring 20th century management we're teaching in our business schools. Rather, it's a separate branch of management, what I call entrepreneurial management, that deals specifically with those conditions of extreme uncertainty that are what startups are all about. If we look at the history of 20th century management, and we look at our friends who have regular jobs, it's relatively straightforward to know if you're doing a good job or not. Basically, a manager, a professional, figures out the plan. So you take a big project and you break it down into a plan, which is a series of tasks. Each of those tasks gets farmed out to a functional specialist in a functional department who does the same kind of task day in and day out. And if you just do your task as good as the manager expected, or maybe better, then you're doing a good job. You're going to get promoted. Things are going to go well. But not just go well for you, also go well for the company, also go well for the company's customers. For example, if you're a designer and you make a product easier to use, then that's a true win-win-win. You get promoted, the customer likes the product more, and the company makes more money because the product's now easier to use. That's all good. But if you're an entrepreneur, it's not that easy. If you're an entrepreneur, most of the time you're busy building something that nobody wants. If you're building something that nobody wants and you make it easier to use, then you just made it easier for people to realize they don't want your product. That's not a win-win-win, that's a lose-lose-lose. The customer churns out faster, the business makes less money, and you certainly are not going to get promoted. That's the problem with using traditional management concepts in an entrepreneurial context. So what's the alternative? If you look at all the 20th century management systems, they're all based on planning and forecasting as their primary tools. So a professional manager can figure out how good the team is supposed to do, and if we do as good as that or better, we get promoted, otherwise fired. You see, analyst sets a target for a stock price. If you exceed the analyst's expectation, stock price goes up, otherwise goes down. But if you give that some thought, planning and forecasting really only make sense if we have a long and stable operating history from which to make the forecast. Because forecasts are extrapolations from what's worked in the past. And who feels like the world is getting more and more stable every day? Yeah, not exactly. And for those of us who are in startups right now, stability is the last thing on our mind. It's like Muppet Labs in here. Everything's going wrong all the time. So how are we supposed to make accurate forecasts for the future? We can't. We have to create a new management toolkit that's designed specifically for the kind of crazy uncertainty that we face every day. That's what we call entrepreneurial management. Now, the tools of entrepreneurial management are different from traditional management, but they're still discipline, they're still really important, they're still a process that we follow. For example, the most important concept in the toolbox of entrepreneurial management is this really overused buzzword called the pivot. And certainly here in San Francisco, people are sick and tired of hearing about startups pivoting left and right, but it's such an important concept, that's why it's become jargon. A pivot is a change in strategy without a change in vision. That's it. When entrepreneurs get into trouble, they don't just give up and go home, but neither do they kind of persevere the plane straight into the ground through stubbornness. They're able to do this funny combination of things. That's why we use the analogy of the pivot. They can keep one foot rooted in what they have learned while changing one other thing about their business, something about the strategy. So maybe we had the right product but for the wrong customer. Maybe we had the right product but the wrong pricing. Maybe we had the right pricing and customer but actually we solved the wrong problem with our product, or a whole bunch of other things that can go wrong. And the reason that's such an important part of entrepreneurial management is that everything we do in a startup has to be geared towards learning that it's time to pivot a little bit sooner. See, if you look at the stories of successful entrepreneurs and compare it to the stories of unsuccessful entrepreneurs, contrary to what you see in the movies, the successful entrepreneurs did not have better ideas than the failed ones. Actually, we generally had equally bad ideas at the beginning. The first version of PayPal was digital cyber cash for PDAs. eBay was about selling Beanie Babies or Pez dispensers online. Remember how the Google founders were going to make all their money from selling those yellow search appliances in corporate environments? I mean, these original business plans from our vantage point now look just positively stupid. And in fact, so do the unsuccessful entrepreneurs. The difference is the successful entrepreneurs had the discipline necessary to pivot when it wasn't working, to change the strategy without abandoning the whole vision. And that really is the bedrock upon which the whole discipline of entrepreneurial management is built.